Good day, everyone, and welcome back to the Amplifier podcast. Really excited to start off this new season of the show with a really near and dear friend of mine. Zhenya Rozinskiy is from Los Angeles, and he and I became friends, strangely enough, on the beach in Mexico 4 or 5 years ago. And over Christmas holidays, we have always talked about entrepreneurial ideas and getting to know each other. And Zhenya has a really unique set of skills and experience that I think in today's environment are extremely valuable, because over the last few years, we have all shifted to a new paradigm shift around where our people work and where we find the top talent. And Zhenya has spent his entire life finding top talent on a global scale and developing a very unique way of finding those people for others and for helping them be extremely successful for his clients in integrating those teams to create extraordinary results. Zhenya, your company is called Mirigos. I can never pronounce it. Mirigos.
It actually means to astound somebody, right?
We literally just talked about it before the show, and I can never pronounce it because I just think of it as Zhenya's business. I also want to share about my friend, his unique journey into both entrepreneurism and capitalism. Zhenya, as a young man, as the Cold War ended, and his family escaped the USSR and emigrated to the United States with nothing. He's originally from Odessa, Ukraine, and has deep roots in the business world in Ukraine. And he had to literally come to America to learn English and to figure out how the whole world worked in this new and strange thing called capitalism. And he's figured it out for everyone listening and how they can now tap into talent globally. Zhenya, my pal, you got a great new book, Global Talent, Local Results.
Yep.
Welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan.
Tell me your story about your humble beginnings and how you got to America, and tell everyone your origin story.
So you touched on it correctly, right? I am from Odessa, Ukraine. Back then, when I left, it was still USSR. The country was right before the country collapsed. I came to the United States 4th of July, 1991. A pretty meaningful date, the day of independence. I guess that's when I obtained my own independence. I was 17 years old at that time. When you say we came with nothing can mean a lot of things to different people. Back then, USSR did not allow you to take out any personal documents, any jewelry, anything of value. You were allowed to exit. You needed an exit visa, and you were allowed to exit with $100 per person when you immigrated. So I came here with my parents and 3 of my 4 grandparents. So 6 of us and $600. So, yep, that's the start. First I came to San Francisco, lived there for about 12 years before I moved to LA. Now I've been living in Los Angeles. And, I got a job in IT. And that's what I knew, that's what I liked. And so I went through all the different ranks. I just started as a developer, and started as a QA engineer, went development, project management, became a manager, director, VP, CTO, blah, 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 blah. So all the normal steps of growth. Had some of my own companies, started some successful and unsuccessful. So it's a great learning opportunity. And then, probably about 15, 17 years ago, I started realizing that the whole idea of remote, right? Back then, we talked about remote. This is way before COVID. This is way before the whole world switched to remote. But we were all looking for, where do you hire next talent, right? Where do you hire people? India was becoming a really big outsourcing location. Asia, Eastern Europe, a little later, but also was coming into that market. And I had to figure out how to work with them. So during my career, back before I had my business, so back when I was a VP of engineering, director, CTO of companies, I work with outsourcing companies literally in every continent on the world, except Antarctica, sure. But every other continent,
The Penguins didn't have much to
yeah,
offer.
I think that just we tried. We tried, didn't work. They're cute, but I've tried it, and I was running against the same problem over and over and over again. It just didn't work. And you try the different shop and you go, okay, this person is wrong, let's replace the person. This outsourcing provider is wrong, let's replace the outsourcing provider. And then you run into ultimately the same problem. And you talk to all your coworkers or your peers in other companies, and they're all running into the same problem. So at some point you got to ask yourself, if you're doing the same thing and expect different results, something's wrong. And so what is the problem? And about 12, 14 years ago, I started realizing that the problem is fundamental how outsourcing works. Back then, I was a VP of engineering at Ticketmaster, company that most everybody knows. We had outsourcing companies, partners in India and China, and it just didn't work, right? It just did not work. So I said, how about we try it in a different way? And I built a team for us in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine specifically. Why Ukraine? Simply because, well, the joke was if you get to pick your business trip, would you rather go to Ukraine or somewhere else? And I was originally from there. I speak the language. So it sort of made sense. But also, it was a place with a great talent. And we did it, and we did it in a completely different model. We didn't do outsourcing. We actually hired our own guys, and we ran them and managed it and set it up as they were our own employees. Even technically, they weren't, but that's how we did it. And it was very successful. So successful that my friends that worked at other companies started asking, hey, how do you do this? Why? What works? What doesn't work? And I started telling them, I started helping them. They started doing something similar. And at some point, I realized there's an idea, right? Why not do this as a business? So in 2014, I left Ticketmaster, I left my job, and I started focusing exclusively on building Mirigos, where what we do is we help our clients build very successful distributed engineering teams. And when I say engineering, anything that has to do with software development, it doesn't have to be development. It could be project management, product management, design, anything that has to do with software. And like I said, we do it in a completely different, we're not an outsourcing shop. We do it with the idea that truly solves the fundamental problem of how this whole thing works. And we've been successful, right? And the only reason we're successful is because customers like it. It works for them, it works for everybody, and so it works for us.
When I was reading your book, what struck me and what I really like fundamentally is that like, this whole concept of how you develop this process wasn't just sort of sitting there and coming up with a new idea. You built this for yourself at Ticketmaster. You were doing it this way because the traditional ways of either recruiting, direct hire, and outsourcing weren't giving you the results that you needed.
Yep.
Right? So, what is it about outsourcing? Like, why do IT leaders, and, I'll just say this, I said it before the show, you could replace software development and IT in your book and in your thinking with any number of kinds of remote work or distributed workforce sort of strategies,
Yep.
because I've experienced a lot of the challenges that you've talked about in your book and why you do things the way you do. I've experienced this with remote workers who I direct hired. I've experienced a lot of the same issues when I've outsourced projects to a variety of different companies, large and small. So fundamentally, why does outsourcing fail?
It's a great question, and it's a complicated question. It fails because, and I keep saying this, I keep repeating myself, I keep saying there's a fundamental problem when you deal with outsourcing. And what I mean by fundamental, it's not about this shop or that location or this person, it's the engineering of it doesn't work. Think about outsourcing as three parties. There's a client, right? So a company that wants to use the service. What do they want? They want good quality work at the price that they think is fair, right? So it's at the right price. and they want the least amount of problems possible. Fair enough. Now, think about a person that's an outsourcing person, right? So, and I don't mean the company, the outsourcing company. I'm talking about the actual engineer that they hired that works for an outsourcing company and now works for them. So, if we're going to think about them, what do they want? They want to do a good job. Most people, when they get up in the morning, they want to do a good job. Most people don't go with, today I'm just not going to be good. Now, some are more successful at it, some are less, but they really want to do a good job. So this person gets up in the morning and says, I really want to do a good job. And they show up to work for this client. But do they work for the client? They don't. They work for an outsourcing company. Who is their manager? Well, they're told that their manager is whoever the manager of the client is. But in reality, they have a manager at the outsourcing company. That manager is responsible for their annual review. That manager is responsible for their promotion, for their salary, for everything. That manager is responsible for approving their vacation. So when there is a conflict, and there's always a conflict, between two people saying, I want you to do this and I want you to do that, who are they going to listen to? They're naturally going to listen to their true manager, which is the outsourcing company. Now, next step is a good engineer doesn't want to be a widget pusher. They want to be part of creation. They want to be part of something bigger. They want to be part of the team. They want to be part, they want to go and say, look to their friends, I built this product. Now, if you're a client and you've got your core team, let's say locally, right? It doesn't matter local or not, but you've got your core team, they're part of your design meetings, they're part of decision making, they're part of this thought process of how this product is going to look. And you've got somebody that works for the third party that you hire to build a tool, right? Let's say build a mobile app, whatever it is. And you gave them a doc and you said, hey, build this. How much are you listening to them? Mm-hmm. Are they really on top of your mind when you go, how are we going to do this? Naturally, most of the time when you work with outsourcing, there's time difference. So this somebody works for somebody else. Are you going to schedule your meetings around their time or around your time? So things like that create a natural disconnect between somebody that wants to build a product and the client that just wants to get something out of it. There is another, yeah, go ahead.
You touched on something. I think, I agree with you 100%. I always say that with very few exceptions, I think everyone gets up in the morning and wants to be useful.
Yep.
Right? They want to be successful.
Yep.
And I think deeper than that, people want to be connected to a purpose.
Absolutely.
Not just a task.
Absolutely.
And so if you structure these sorts of things where people are just focusing on some tasks that they're not really tied to the purpose, they can't take personal pride.
100%.
I think purpose and pride tie into quality, it ties into connectedness, it ties into feeling like you belong. Yep. Like we all go to work every day and we probably, I think the vast majority of people on the planet who work every day likely spend more time with their peers and colleagues than they do with their spouses and their children.
Absolutely.
Right? Because if we're spending 40 or 50 hours a week at work, we come home, we get 2 or 3 hours a night with our family, and then we go to sleep. We're sleeping 7 or 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're working 7 or 8 hours. There's not much left in between. Like our actual connectedness time with our immediate family is often less than with our work peers. And if you don't feel connected to value and purpose to create pride, you're going to have an unproductive, disengaged workforce that is uncaring and unfocused on the kinds of outcomes that you want to create in your business because they don't care, because you haven't created an environment, a culture where they should care, where they can care.
But with all of that added, I'm going to come back to sort of where the issue is, right? So now, right, everything you said is absolutely spot on, but it's actually aggravated by one other thing. So I'm a client. I hired somebody to do a widget, right? A mobile app as an example that I used. And it's going to take 3 months. So this person's going to work for me for 3 months, and then they're going to move to a different project.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to still have the same different project, could be a completely different company, right? Most likely. They're still going to have the same manager. They're still going to have the same people around them within their outsourcing company.
Right.
So they're not going to build a relationship with me because they know it's not going to last.
Yeah.
It's a transactional business.
Right.
And again, I'm not even yet talking about the outsourcing company. I'm just talking about the client and an employee, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's transaction. Now, let's bring the third party into it, the outsourcing company. What's their motivation? And they hate me when I say this. Their motivation is to make money.
100%.
It's not a bad thing. But
No, it's not a bad thing, but it does speak to a lack of alignment with outcomes.
Exactly. So now we've just covered three people, three participants in the process. All three have completely different goals.
Yeah.
No alignment. The outsourcing company says, yes, I want to please my client because they're paying me, but ultimately I'm driven by making money.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did, right, the whole idea when I did this for myself and now what we do at Mirigos, we took the outsourcing company out, completely out. And we said a person who is the employee now doesn't work for the outsourcing company. They work for the client. There is no manager at the outsourcing company. They get up in the morning. There is no question who their manager is. There is no question who their peers are. There is no question who they're aligned to. They're not there for 3 months. In fact, when somebody comes to us and says, hey, Zhenya, can you help me? I have a 3 month project. I say, no, we can't. We don't do 3 month projects. We don't do short-term projects. A 6 month project. No, we do long-term, meaning really long-term, right? Somebody's going to.
You help them build a team.
We help them build a team.
Yeah.
And our role is we're recruiters, we're HR, and we help them be compliant. And when I say compliant, there's several ways to be compliant, right? There's compliance with how you pay money. There's compliance with all the international laws. There's compliance with all of that. But then there's another interesting compliance. A lot of our customers are small to mid-sized businesses. We have some corporate, but most of it's small to mid.
Right. Small to mid-sized people don't necessarily have the infrastructure to deal with all of that complexity of different countries and all the things that you need to take care of.
They don't. And when they're ready to raise money, right, to get investments or get acquired, they have to be able to answer one question. Who builds your product? Who are all these people to build your product? Who does it belong to? And we've had this, right? We've had those issues many times. And I know from my startup days where that's an issue. When you start telling them, well, I've got 30 people in this 25 different countries, an investor goes, whoa, I don't know how to deal with it. Are they your employees? No, they're contractors. Well, they're contractors. I don't know how to do. So I don't want to take that risk. We provide the layer that takes that away, right? So it's very clear. Right. We're a U.S. corporation.
Yep.
We clearly provide the service. It's not ambiguous in any way. And we deal with all the employees.
Right.
So, but really what we did is we took the third player out completely and aligned goals between the employee and the client of the company.
I've got two really interesting stories myself about outsourcing for software development that we did. All I can say is neither one worked.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The first one was a sizable, started off, we wanted to digitize a whole part of our business. We needed to build a whole series of apps in our platform. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to go to the professional services outsourcing department of the platform themselves. They're going to be experts. It was a sizable investment. I knew I was going to be paying a premium because I was paying the platform that I was building on, their professional services department, to build me what I needed. And what I found was, how do I say this? felt like the fox was in the henhouse,
Uh-huh.
right? They had a project management team who really weren't working for me truly. They were working for themselves to do upselling of new add-ons and new capabilities. They were driven by their own profit, not by building me what was going to work for me. And moreover, when it came to scope, I had a very clear picture of what I wanted done, what I needed for my business. And instead of them building what I needed that was going to, digitize my business, they tried to force my business to change into tools that they already had in their platform and then customize it slightly. So they were kind of, they weren't making it for me. They were trying to force me into, and the gist of it is they created all kinds of complexity. It was overbuilt. It was over-engineered. And all of a sudden, instead of making things flow in my business, they were trying to force our business to change to work with their tool that they tweaked for us. And it was a train wreck. And by the time they were done, there was about 30% in change orders on top of a premium price that I was paying. So I ended up paying over $100,000 more than budget. I didn't get what I wanted. And in the end, I had to pay another company to tear it all down and rebuild it the way I wanted it.
Yep.
It was an awful experience. An awful experience. Now, a much more cost-effective but equally ineffective result was another outsourcing company that I had hired to build me a series of tools on the same platform from India. And, they built exactly what I wanted. I got exactly the vision I had spelled out. The interconnectedness of the different tools was exactly what I wanted. And then I found out that they took all kinds of coding shortcuts, and none of it would pass the security protocols of the platform. And so, they put on the facade of expertise, and they built something that was functional that couldn't pass the basic security requirements. And again, I had to get somebody else to clean it up. And what I found is, which you're talking about that whole lack of alignment, and there's a lot of idiosyncrasies to that triangle between the client, the team member, and the outsourcing company. But at the core, what I found is that outsourcing didn't get me what I wanted and cost way more than I had planned. In the examples that I've used, right, where I've used it, and we've had to pivot so we have a hybrid approach now that is more like what you do, without me even knowing how to describe it. But we found a really great project manager developer who is a contractor, and he has a team of people. But Jeff's been on my show before. Jeff acts like he's a member of our team. Right. He cares about, he comes to our Christmas parties. Yep. He participates in company events. His wife has come to company events, but he's not an employee. He's a outstaffed outsourcer. Right. And then he has a team of people behind him. And so it's a bit of a hybrid, but it mimics a lot of the things that you're talking about, that he is really part of our team. He is entrenched in, committed to our success. He's very agile. And, and we're not subject to change. He acts like he's part of our team. And he's the guy that I found who fixed all of these outsourcing train wrecks that I had experienced in the past. And I basically stay away from it altogether now. The outsourcing approach, I'd rather outstaff it. And even when I have big projects coming up, when he's adding more people to support me.
Right.
Right?
So you touched, it's interesting because what you said is exactly, and I mean 100%, what you'll hear from anybody who's tried, outsourcing in this way, right? And we gotta make sure we understand there are different types of outsourcing.
Sure.
If you are Bank of America and you build an outsourcing company of 5,000 people somewhere overseas, sure, it's outsourcing, but it's a little different, right? That's not what we're doing. And what you touched on two things that are those dirty little secrets of outsourcing.
Well, this is where I was going to get to next. Is I really wanted to talk. I mean, every business has a backstage set of hidden secrets about how they make money.
Right.
Right? There's the front stage and there's the backstage. And look, there's nothing wrong with profit. We all have businesses to make a profit. I don't
Absolutely.
care if you're making electricity or you're helping an electricity company, keep their facilities running, or you're a delivery guy, or you're a painting business. You have a backstage. You have a secret to, you have what I call entrepreneurial tricks and shortcuts that are the profit generators in your business.
Yep.
But when you're outsourcing, it becomes a little bit more, I don't know what the word is, but it feels like cloak and dagger, because if I, in my businesses, if I have hidden secrets for how we make money, that's about productivity and efficiency and ways we do things behind the scenes. The customer it doesn't impact the customer. We're providing a service and we're doing it. But in this triangle where you're providing people for someone else to use in their business,
Yep.
what are those hidden backstage secrets of outsourcing that people need to understand that can really impact their decisions, can impact their success, can impact their failures, can impact their costs?
All right. This is going to be an interesting topic. I'm not sure I can feel safe, but a lot of outsourcing companies are going to really hate me for doing this, but it is what it is. So let's talk about number one, which is what you said, change orders, and they sort of didn't build what you wanted to build, what you wanted. So assume I'm a client and I hire, anyway, right? So there's a client and there's an outsourcing company. And the client hires them to build a mobile app and says it's a 3 months mobile app, right? I need you to build it, then I need you to give me the code and we're going to support it for the future. An outsourcing company doesn't want to have a 3 month contract. They want this to be a 3-year contract, preferably 30-year contract, right? They want it long term. Now, they can't not deliver. But what they can do is and I've done this and I've seen this, right? This is not sort of rumors that people, I've been on the due diligence committees for startups and investors, and I've seen this. So what they do is they'll build the app, which is exactly what you want, but it doesn't have maintainability, right? It cannot be maintained. There's no documentation. The code is written in a way that nobody can understand it. So did I deliver what you promised? Yes. Can you transfer it over? No. And so the next project becomes, for the next 3 months, we're going to pay you to make this code so we can go and maintain it. And what do? They make it even less maintainable because that's their job assurance, right? That's their job guarantee. And at some point,
You know what? I mean, that's exactly what happened with me when I had this outsourcing company build me an app.
Yep.
That company that I told you about in India, names protected. But they built it in such a way that no one else could maintain it.
Yep.
They built it in such a way that if I wanted it to pass security measures on the platform, they would have to do extra work and they would have to support it and they would have to maintain it. I'm like, that wasn't. And further, because of those issues, the vision for that product was, I want you to build this for me, but I want it to be built in such a way that I can put it on that platform's app exchange, because I have a vision of selling this app to other users. And it was built in such a way that could never happen.
Right.
Because it could never pass the scrutiny of the process on the platform to allow it to be a tool that could then be supported or could be sold on a subscription service for other people to use. And so I literally lived this story. And it was frustrating because I literally said up front in the scope exactly the intent, that it needed to pass security for the scalability of that app. And they built it, and they said, yeah. It wasn't until I had someone else look at the code and go, someone else, my in-house outsourced partner, looked at the code and said, this will never pass. Like, we're going to have to rebuild this entire thing. It's not scalable. It'll never pass the adjudicators who review security measures. And it's so convoluted that we can't scale it. And so I live this exact example.
Yeah. I'll give you another one that I'm sure you lived because you mentioned change orders.
Oh, big time.
So let's say you and I work for the same company, right? I'm your employee, and we're sitting in a conference room, and you're telling me, hey, Zhenya, I'm running your engineering team. And you tell me, Zhenya, hey, I want to build this, right? And you jump on the whiteboard and you draw this, and I look and I go, hey, and I'm thinking, he's not covering this scenario. What am I going to do? If I'm a normal human being, right? And I work for the company and I care, I'm going to go, hey, Don, you're not covering this scenario. What are we going to do about it? And you say, oh yeah, you're right. I'm not. Or you'll say I am in some other way. Anyway, right? And we'll document it. And when we go build it, we'll now cover it. Now, if I'm an outsourcing company and you gave me this scenario, right? Build this X, Y, and Z, and I give you a price for it, be it a fixed bid, and we'll talk about prices later. We could, because that's another interesting secret of the business. So they either give you a fixed bid or they give you time and material, doesn't matter, right? They tell you, hey, it's going to cost you X. But they know you missed something.
Well, even more than that, Shayna, because again, I live this story as well.
Uh-huh.
This was a several $100,000 pain in my keister. Not only did they miss it, but in their language, throughout the conversations, they talked about this concept of, well, as we get into the project and we learn your business, our approach is going to be agile. It's not going to be waterfall. And so we'll be able to make those adjustments to make sure that we fit exactly what we're doing to you as we're doing it.
Yep.
And so this is like right in the conversations before we sign a contract. And then we sign the contract, right?
Yep.
And then every time there was an agile change that was to align with the vision that was spelled out, what was the words they used?
Change order.
Is it in the scope of work? Oh, it's not. We better do a change order.
Yep. Yep.
And I really felt like it was just bait and switch the whole time.
But it's not an accident. It's a business model.
Oh, no, and I could tell, right? Like I
Right.
said earlier, in that model where there was scope of work and they used all this language around agile and water flow and we're
Yep.
going to make it exactly what you want. They gave the impression that, for this price that we've defined, I'm going to get what I asked for.
Right.
But then they write it in a contract and then they lean into the contract. So they've got this legal measure to go, well, it's not spelled out in the scope of work. It's a change order. And, I just felt the entire time that I had and they had a project manager, right, who was supposed to be my project manager, but was really their project manager to manage change and escalation and price. And, you could feel it. And I felt like it felt dirty.
But this is why big outsourcing shops, right? I'm talking about the big ones, right? There's several outsourcing shops in the world, probably
Sure.
10 or less, that have hundreds of thousands of employees, right? I'm talking about 50, 100, 150,000 employees. That's how they survive. That's how they
Sure.
live. They never leave, right? The guests check in, they never check out.
Right.
You cannot get rid of it. Once they're in,
Yeah. And I suppose, you hear about these big app developments that governments use that go millions of dollars over budget or billions of dollars over budget and late delays. And most of our listeners and your clients aren't governments.
Right.
They're not major Fortune 500 companies that can decide they're going to do a 20 million or with $10 million worth of change or, hundreds of millions in dollars in app development. Small and medium-sized businesses are making decisions about building an app with a fixed, relatively tight budget that, if they make a decision to spend $100,000, they need to get the product deployed for that 100 grand, plus or minus 10 or 15, maybe 20%.
Right. Absolutely.
You can't have something that takes 3 times longer and 4 times more money and survive as a small or medium-sized business when you're trying to do this kind of work.
Yeah. And you hear about this budget, right? Sometimes not even government. Think about large corporations, right? Large US corporations or any world corporations. Sometimes it goes public because, hey, they built this project that was this millions of dollars.
Right.
And it's not because they planned it to be that millions of dollars. It's because that's what it ended up being,
Right.
because they had to do it probably 2 or 3 times, and they had to do it and redo it, and then it wasn't what they wanted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for a small to medium sized company, outsourcing is a solution. Let's say you have a company and you want to build a website, right? Hey, I just need to go build a basic website. Absolutely, go do outsourcing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do anything else. That's the best idea. But if it's your core business, if it's your core expertise, it needs to be part of what you're doing. It needs to be part of your team. Now, used to be part of your team, local hires, right? If I'm in Los Angeles, you got to hire everybody who is in Los Angeles that can drive to the office every day. Today, you can have somebody local to your team and be in a different country, in a different continent, anywhere else, because being part of your team is not a physical location, it's the state of mind.
Right.
And that's where people need to get, and that's what it is. And that's, going back to the outsourcing companies don't want that, right? They
Right.
want to be the experts. One of the questions I ask a lot, right? Potential clients come and go, yeah, great. So what's your expertise? Are you a .NET shop, or you're a Java shop, or you're, Node.js, whatever it is, whatever technology is? And I look at them and I go, I'm a people shop,
Right.
right? I'm not there to pretend that I have the expertise to build your product.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody does. You do. It's your product. What I can do is get you the right people that can learn your product and build it with you. Anytime they're going to come into an outsourcing company and says, yeah, we are .NET experts, or we're Java experts, or we're whatever experts, they're not, right? They're experts they could be experts from the technology point of view. They still don't know the product. They still don't know the business. They still don't know what they're doing.
Right.
We touched on price. So that's another interesting thing, in a secret, if you will, in outsourcing business. Most outsourcing companies, they will quote your price based on either a job, or if it's time and material, they're going to say, our architect is this much per hour, our senior engineer is that much, middle is that one. But they don't pay people the same salaries, do they?
No.
So now they've got 3 candidates. So, Don, you come in and you go, I need a iOS developer because we're building this Apple, app for iPhone. So they got 3 candidates. One makes X, one makes X plus 500, one makes X plus 1,000. But they already quoted to you the price per hour for their senior, quote unquote, senior Apple developer. So they now have motivation to convince you that their cheapest guy is the best match. Now,
Right.
if it's really not the best match, they're not going to do it, right? They're not idiots. They're not going to give you somebody that's wrong. But if they're about the same, that's what they're going to do.
Sure.
Now, think about you as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. If I come to you and I say, I've got these 2 candidates. This one will cost you X. This one will cost you X plus 500. You pick. You're going to interview them both, and you're going to decide if this one is
Right.
worth it to you to pay $500 more, using as an example. I now took it out of my false motivation, right? It's on you. Here are 2 people. You pick which one you want.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it doesn't matter, because I know what their salary is, right? So whatever price I gave you is based on their price, is really based on the $500 difference is a $500 difference in their salary. That's what I can tell you from my business.
Yep. But that doesn't. But that $500 might have a cost. But if you have the ability to actually dive in and interview from a capabilities for the project, for the role,
Exactly.
and you may make a decision that you want to spend the extra $500 because this person clearly has a unique advantage in what I want this person to do inside my business, versus if that's sort of hidden behind a curtain that I've got 3 candidates, they're all capable, one's extraordinary, one is just capable, but if my motivation is I can save myself $1,000 a month by giving you the less capable person, they're still competent, but they
Right.
don't have they're competent, but they don't necessarily have a unique ability in what you're trying to accomplish.
Absolutely.
You're not going to get the same value,
So think about it.
and you can't control it.
Think about you're hiring somebody full-time, right? You're hiring a full-time employee, and you have your process, you have your resumes, blah, blah, blah. So everybody, forget about outsourcing, right? You're just hiring people. And you've got two final candidates.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to pick between them based on who is the cheapest, or are you going to pick between them who is the best match for the job that you have in mind?
We always hire for a right fit.
Exactly. So
right?
Why would you, when you deal with outsourcing, why would you agree to get somebody who is the cheapest? And I guarantee you 100% of the time, you're getting the cheapest.
Sure. Yeah.
Because it's driven by profit.
Yeah. I think we now get, I lived it, and I think the listeners can sort of now appreciate the complexities and the pitfalls of outsourcing. This is different than, say, recruiting. Like, I've used recruiting firms, and I haven't had a ton of success there either, mainly because their motivations are similar to an outsourcing company when they're just trying to find you a person. What I've found often with recruiting companies, because they're often taking 25, 50, 75% of an annual salary with some promise that you're going to, you can try these people for 3 or 6 months and there's a guarantee on our fee.
Right.
But what I've always experienced with recruiting firms is they're trying to get the deal done so they can move on.
True.
Right? So, they get a fee, they're going to get their whatever, 50%, 25% fee. And if they can get you to hire a good enough person in the first 30 or 60 days, they can move on to sell someone else a good enough person.
Right.
Instead of waiting a month or 2 more months or whatever the time frame to get you the right fit person. And so I get approached an awful lot. As soon as we start advertising for new positions inside of our businesses, inevitably we get unsolicited inbound email and phone calls from recruiters going, we can help you. And I don't even reply because my experience has been that they're trying to get you to sign off on good enough.
I think with recruiters it's a bit better because the decision is yours, right?
100%. It's definitely mine. I'm just speaking to the backstage motivation of the recruiter is,
right.
If they can get you to make a decision on good enough, they can move on because they don't have a vested interest in the long-term success of that employee. They have vested interest in the first 3 months that you keep them.
True.
Right?
So we are really recruiters, but we don't.
Sure, but I want to get to that now because I understand that you're recruiting.
We don't charge a fee, right? We don't charge a fee.
Yeah, I think it's different. And so, I'd never heard this term before until I read your book. I've heard the term, direct hire. I am familiar with outsourcing and I'm familiar with recruiting. But your model is, at least for me, relatively a new concept, outstaffing.
Yep.
And many of our listeners probably have never heard the term outstaffing. And I know you touched on how it's different, but now that we've kind of created this frame of outsourcing, recruiting, and we haven't talked about some of the pitfalls of direct hiring when it comes to remote workers yet. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but just now that we throw this name out there, outstaffing, tell me how it's different and what it is.
So outstaffing is really, right? Outsourcing is outsource a production of something, right? If I'm a business that's making pens, I can outsource somebody producing caps. Right? I don't want to do it. I do pens, somebody else does caps. And that's outsourcing. Outstaffing is a business of people. It's the business of, I need people that are going to work for me. And that's where the recruiting, interestingly, comes in because we're really recruiters, right? That's who we are. We are recruiters. But we're recruiters on a subscription model, if you will.
Right.
So when you hire somebody full-time, and a typical full-time, I'm not talking about executives, right? I'm talking about typical full-time engineer. A recruiting company will charge you somewhere between 20 to 25% for the most part of the annual salary.
Right.
And it's usually 3 months guarantee. So if the person lasts 3 months, they've earned their money. We don't charge anything up front. So we're going to do all the work. We're going to recruit. We're going to do everything that we need to do. And the person's going to start working for you. And it's going to take us time to even recoup the money that we've spent on our own recruiting, right, on our costs.
Right. So you've
Now,
got skin in the game for a
we got
longer
skin in the
haul.
game,
Yeah.
absolutely. I can tell you that if somebody leaves before about 6 months mark, we lost money.
Right.
It's at 6 months where we're about to break even. Now, if you think about it, at 6 months we're about to break even. Do I want to play this game for somebody to last for 8 months or 7 months or even 9 months? I don't, because the amount of effort we put in, I don't want to make 3 months worth of our fees,
Right.
right? So for me to be successful, to know that it's successful, somebody's going to last for about a year or more, and then I can go, okay, that makes sense. Now, if I'm working with a new company and we don't have a minimum, right? So when somebody comes to us and says, want to hire one person, we say, okay, we'll get you one person. Where a lot of outsourcing companies will have a minimum either per person or per year spent, right?
Right.
We're only going to work with you if you're going to commit to spending this much money with us for a year. We don't have that. So what I need to do is I need to get you a process and a person, right? Because we're also about the process of hiring. So I need to get your process and the person that you like enough that after you've hired one person and now you need to hire somebody else, you're going to come to us and say, give me more people.
Right.
That's the only time we're successful. Now, again, our guarantee is you can let somebody go with a 1 day notice if you wanted to. So there's no commitment on your part. So if somebody doesn't work out, no notice, right?
Right.
We ask for notice just because we want to be nice to people, but contractually, no notice. You can let somebody go. But the idea being is we have, as you said, we have a skin in the game, right? So we are part of your success. And that's going back to aligning goals. I don't refer to clients as clients, I refer to them as partners. And when I talk to them, I always say, guys, we're partnering. My success is based on your success, and your success is really based on my success. And we run into this all the time because somebody is not hiring enough or interviewing enough, right? Somebody is not participating fast enough in the process. And it's my job or our job is to explain to them and say, this is why you're shooting yourself in the foot, right? This is why you're not doing yourself any favors. It's not about us, it's about you. We just recently had somebody, they took over 2.5 weeks to review resumes and get back to us. By the time they get back to us, several people already took other jobs, right, and weren't available. So now they waste the time. We waste the time, fine. They waste the time because they reviewed resumes, they wanted to talk to them for nothing. So
Yeah, there's nothing worse than looking at, and talking to, interviewing a great candidate, and then you delay making a decision. You go back and say, I'd like to hire you. Oh, I've taken another job.
right,
That's happened to me. It hasn't happened to me in a long time. Some of my, I would say, less seasoned hiring managers inside my business will procrastinate and delay on the process. But I learned that a long time ago that if you find great talent, you have a systematic way of getting to that decision and you make a decision because you don't want to lose a great person because you sat on it for 2 weeks.
for sure, absolutely.
Right.
And so the whole thing, right, this whole alignment comes from I can't get, like, I'll be the first one, and I've done this with so many people. A company comes in and says, yep, we like this person, want to make an offer. And I'll go, you don't. You don't. Because something that we're seeing, either my recruiter or myself, if I talk to the person myself, and I do talk to some people, or I see some of the emails and I see something there that's a big red flag to me. Right? This is not the type of personality that's gonna last. It's not a match. I'll be the first one to say you don't want to hire them. Because I know if they hire them and they're not happy, it's
Yeah.
on me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what I like about the business model, and specifically, I think this is such a great business model for small and medium sized businesses because you have skin in the game. I mean, it addresses the pitfalls of outsourcing.
Yep.
I think for me, it addresses the pitfalls of recruiting. And then it opens up small and medium sized companies who would otherwise really struggle with how do I find talent globally? I don't know how to do that. I'm in Pittsburgh or I'm in Los Angeles and we've got a team of 50 people. I don't know how to hire someone in Mexico or in Colombia or in Venezuela or in the Philippines or in the Ukraine. Now I got to hire someone to manage all that. And that's why there is, if you look at the phenomena of remote workers, it was forced upon a lot of people in the world because of COVID. And lots of companies, large and small, are retracting back from that post COVID because they don't know how to manage it.
Yeah.
Right? They don't know how to manage so many aspects of it, not even when they're direct hires. But I think the minute that you have complexities of they're in a different country, I don't know the rules, I don't know the employment rules, the laws, the taxation structures. I think there's a lot of different things that outstaffing with what you're doing creates a really interesting opportunity to open the world for a company. So, let's just talk about outstaffing for a minute, specifically around, for the target audience that you have, which I keep saying small and medium-sized businesses.
Before we do, I actually
Okay.
want to share a story.
Yeah, please do, because I'll dive into my next question.
Yeah, it's exactly, we're talking about managing differently, right? So when I was a Ticketmaster, we had, so Ticketmaster is part of Live Nation. Ticketmaster was about 1,000 people company, the Ticketmaster group. They got acquired by Live Nation. Anyway, not the interesting part of it. Most of the engineering was on 2 or 3 floors in the same building.
Okay.
And people that worked together were on the same floor.
Sure.
So a lot of communication was what I would call accidental, right? I walk in the hallway, I see somebody and go, oh, by the way, I meant to tell you this. And I tell them in the hallway and I keep walking.
Yeah, there's definitely a tribal communication that happens when you're in the same proximity to people.
Absolutely.
I often, work in a home office. I have my head office about 15 minutes drive from me, where a lot of the team who work, in that office go every day. But we have several other offices across the country.
Mhm.
And there is something tribal that happens when you walk into the building, and you might
Absolutely.
just be walking to the boardroom or the washroom, and you walk by someone's office, and something pops in your head and goes, "Oh, hey, by the way."
Absolutely. And you cannot replace it.
No, you cannot.
You cannot replace it. So I'm not saying, after all, right, you were in LA recently and we met for dinner.
Yes.
And it was a great dinner. We had a good time because there's something that in that personal relationship, right? We could jump on Zoom and talk, but it's not the same.
No,
Right?
it's not the same. It's
Let's
breaking
get
bread,
together
sure.
and have a good time. But so anyway, we had a team, we started building a team in Ukraine. And the communication was really, really tough. Hey guys, talk to them. I don't want to do this. I'll send them an email. No, call them. And back then it was all on Skype, right? We didn't have Zoom. Call them. And then I set up a rule and I said, guys, no conversation without cameras on. Like no meeting, camera must be on. Because there's something in that visual, there's something in that body language, right? It connects.
Well, 100%. In our Amplifier courses that we teach around sales and marketing, I teach people something very simple that many people, I think, people, it's easy to lean in on something impersonal like a text message or an email, and maybe the whole audience needs to hear it. If they might know it, but they don't realize it. A text message or an email are words without context. They are words without emotions, but emotions are interpreted on the receiving end that are often not the intent of the sender. And the reason for that is really simple. 85% of human communication is physical.
Right.
It's facial expressions, it's posture, it's eye contact, it's hand gestures. None of that comes across with an emoji, for goodness sakes.
No.
Right?
I was on the plane on Wednesday. I was flying back from meeting with our guys in Europe, and I was texting from the plane with my wife. I'm texting, and we were talking about something. And I sort of, how sometimes in a message you got 2 conversations going at the same time?
Yes.
And so my previous line was a response to the couple of lines before.
I experienced that yesterday in 2 different conversations.
And she is like thinking I'm responding to this. And she's like, why are you telling me this? I'm not like, whoa, honey, stop. This was a response to that. And this is response to this. This is not about you. This is about that conversation we
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
35 seconds ago.
Yeah.
And this happens all the time, right? And this is me talking to my wife. So, she was open to say, why did you say this? And I had an opportunity to explain that's not what I meant, or
Yeah.
not even what I meant. It wasn't meant for this, it was meant for that. And problem resolved. Now, think about if it's employee and the manager,
Mm-hmm.
and I send the same thing to my employee, and they're afraid to ask. They're just going to assume.
Yeah.
They're just going to assume.
Yeah.
So, back to my Ticketmaster story. So, I said,
Yes.
we're going to do video and everything. A couple of months down the road, our building wasn't big enough. And we started moving part of engineering team into a building that we also had across the street. And I mean, literally across the street. In my office, in my window, I was staring at that window, at that building. And guess what? The communication broke exactly the same way
As if
as
they were on the other side of the world.
that same word. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, people started realizing it's not the country, it's not the language, it's not the time difference, it's pure physical proximity.
Yeah.
And as soon as they were forced to figure this out, because these are the people they worked with, but now they moved across the street, they got to figure out how to work with this. There is no accidental running into the hallway or very little of it. So you now have to make an intentional decision to communicate with somebody.
That's right.
All of a sudden, you realize, wait, if I make a decision to communicate with somebody, it doesn't matter whether I communicate with somebody across the street or across the world.
Yeah.
Problem solved. And so a lot of what we're seeing right now, big corporations are pushing back to come back to the office, is because they haven't figured this out yet.
You know what? And so I'm going to expand on that because, we are using Zoom here in this conversation and we can see each other, right?
Yep.
Now, what I've noticed, throughout COVID and post-COVID, there was a huge uptick in people using virtual meeting systems.
Right.
Yesterday I was on a webinar and someone was using GoToWebinar. I might meet with someone else. They'll have me on WebEx. Now, I choose to use Zoom as our universal tool because it just has a lot more flexibility with what you can do with it in a lot of creative ways. But during COVID, Zoom was still, it went from 1 million users to 100 million users overnight, kind of crazy thing. When they didn't have robust security.
Yep.
When that's totally changed now. I mean, I think they've done a ton of great work to make it more and more secure. But major enterprise companies saw Zoom as an internet security risk, so they all leaned into using Microsoft Teams. So most of my clients on the industrial side, on the innovator industrial business, are all enterprise level energy companies of one form or another, whether they make electricity or they make fuels. Those are my clients, whether they move it or refine it or create electrons. It's enterprise energy companies. They all use Microsoft Teams, which is fine. We have Microsoft Teams, and the Microsoft platform is one of our tools baked into the whole Microsoft 360 package that we have across our organization as well. But what I notice with enterprise level companies, which it's paradoxical to me, is that every time I have a meeting with any of my enterprise clients using Microsoft Teams, they never turn on their cameras. And I'm like, why aren't we just on the phone? And so I'm very intentional. I don't care who I'm meeting with. I go into Microsoft Teams meetings with my camera turned off for long enough for people to see I've arrived. And then I give them a prompt by turning my camera on. I'm here now. And it creates some sort of a social cue for people to turn on their cameras. And because if what I found is that if I show up in Microsoft Teams with my camera already on, they don't turn on their camera. But if I go into Microsoft Teams with my camera turned off,
they feel pressure. They do it the same. Yeah.
Well, until I wait for everyone to arrive, and then I turn on my camera. Okay, the meeting can start now. Inevitably, some of those people will turn their cameras on. Inevitably, though, still a vast majority don't. And it speaks to they have a culture, or they haven't developed a culture where they understand the importance of effective communication, which is body language.
This is how bad this is. My wife works for a major corporation.
Mm-hmm.
No names. They were in the office. When COVID started, they were all sent home. About 6 months into it, the corporation made a decision. They're going to be home permanently, right? It was made. It's a decision. That's it. They
Sure.
don't have offices. Well, these people in offices, they work from home. They talk on Teams. Also, that's corporate, so they use it.
Yep.
Anybody who was hired since the start of COVID, since they went home, my wife has never seen their face.
Sure.
Ever.
I had 4 meetings yesterday with enterprise level people, my clients. Some of them were contracts people, some of them were field operations people. I had 4 different meetings yesterday, all on Microsoft Teams, and not one person turned on their camera.
But this is you and a client. I'm talking about people working in the same department.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I have
They talk all day long on chat.
Yeah.
And you have meetings like several times a week.
And they've never met each other, and they don't even know what each other looks like.
I think how
it's to me, it's on the surface, it's insane, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But in reality, it's people falling to a level of comfort because they don't know the negative impact that it has on their success, the success of the team, the success of the company. And if there's one piece of advice, and we're kind of going off on a bit of a tangent relative to outsourcing and outstaffing, but I think it's an important conversation, because if there's one thing that I will say about all of these tools, folks, make it a requirement in your companies to turn on your cameras to have better, more effective communication. My experience, like you mentioned, we had dinner in Los Angeles a few weeks ago. And the reason I was in Los Angeles is because I was there for a business workshop. And it's a group that I've been in, Strategic Coach, that I've been in for 6 or 7 years. Prior to COVID, it was always live in-person workshops. And then throughout COVID, they were really creative with using Zoom to create really, I would say, engaging, shorter Zoom-based workshops where they broke us out into meeting groups. And they did a really great job of making it a more engaging process than if it was just a Zoom call. But what I would say, when you do Zoom interactions really well, my experience is it's maybe 70 or 80% of effective as if you're doing it in person.
Right.
But it's never going to be the same. Like, there's something visceral about being in the room with people and having all of that interaction. But you can have a massive impact on the effectiveness by just make it a requirement. If people are coming to a meeting, turn on the camera. Yeah. And it doesn't matter if it's in-house or if it's with your clients. And if you're meeting with people and they're your client and they don't turn on your camera, a simple little hack that I learned is to create a prompt, which is you go into the meeting knowing that they're not going to have their camera on, go into the meeting with the camera off, wait for everyone to arrive, and then be intentional to turn your camera on. You'll be surprised at how many people will turn their camera on when you do it that way versus if you just come to the meeting with your camera already on. Anyway, let's pivot.
Usually comment with the camera on, but yeah, I'll try that.
Just try it. I mean, it depends on who it is, right? I mean,
right.
You need to know your audience. If you know because of past experience that you show up and a whole bunch of people don't have their camera on, then start the meeting with your camera off and then turn it on. And you will get more people turning their camera on. Anyway, sidebar. But I think a worthwhile conversation in these days of remote work, because we're talking about remote work, and I think this is it was an interesting, valuable sidebar.
Absolutely.
One final thing I want to talk about outstaffing, and then I'm going to move on to another really interesting piece of this conversation, which is all the regional differences. But tell me in short form, from the listener's point of view, outstaffing, kind of sum up the economic and the simplification benefits of outstaffing versus other ways of building a team that we've done.
Wow. Right on. So the economic benefits, there's several, right? So first of all, it's a transparent pricing model, right? And as I mentioned this before, we are not, so different people, different price, you get to pick who it is. Second, There's no hidden. So one of the things, we can probably spend hours and hours talking about hidden secrets of outsourcing. One
Mm-hmm.
of the hidden secrets is when you've got people that you're billing on a project, and then you got people behind them that are helping them get the work done. They're
Right.
not billing, but they're helping, right? They're more senior, they have expertise, and they're sort of one person could be helping, 5, 6 different projects when needed. Well, somebody's got to pay for it,
Yep.
and it's the client that's paying for it, right? That's what it is.
Yeah, those are the hidden indirect costs and the hidden
Right.
overhead costs that happen in any business.
I often ask a question, right? Hey, back in the day when I was hiring outsourcing companies, somebody comes in and goes, hey, we're going to have a team. It's going to be 5 developers, going to have 2 testers, and it's going to have a project manager. I know, project manager. I don't need a project manager. I have a
Mm-hmm.
project manager. No. It's a project manager that manages our team. That's how it works.
Sure.
Never understand that. So in our staffing model, none of that exists.
Right.
None of that exists, right? There is nobody in the back room that's helping our guys to get their job done. They either get their job done or we replace them with somebody that can get the job done, right? If that happens, not a lot, but it happens. Another interesting thing about cost, and that's again a thing that's known by some and not known by many. A successful outsourcing company will always have what's called a bench. There are people that are sitting on a bench without billable projects. They're doing some internal work, they're doing some
Sure.
things, but they're not billable. Give or take, you're talking about 10% of the company, right? That's how, if it's more than 10, it's too much. If it's less than 10, you're running into other issues. So it's somewhere in there.
Right.
Somebody's going to pay for it. And it's the client that's paying for it, right? It's
100%.
the overhead costs. We don't have a bench. In
Right.
outstaffing model, in the true outstaffing model, and I mean true outstaffing model, there's some outsourcing companies, they'll say they're running outstaffing because they give you a person that's 100% your person. It's not an outstaffing model. It's just, different name.
Right.
In a true outstaffing model, there is no bench. We do not have a bench.
Right.
If
You're
somebody's
you're
of the
you're,
project,
you're defining the needs of the project when the project starts, and you go find that capability.
of course.
Right.
Now, not having a bench comes with the financial benefit that I just mentioned. It also comes with another benefit. So let's say you come to me and you say, I'm looking for iOS developer, and I've got one on the bench. Am I motivated to push you the one that I have on the bench or go look for somebody outside? Now,
Exactly. Yeah.
if I don't have one on the bench, then sure, I'll go outside. But if I do, now I'm pushing somebody on you who may not be the right fit.
Yeah.
Not having a bench doesn't there's nobody to push. I don't care. There's 3 candidates or 33 candidates or whatever it is. Pick. It doesn't matter to me which one you pick. So that's another thing where outstaffing comes with a huge financial benefit to the company because our overhead is so much lower and our cost is lower. For example, again, I'm opening up secrets. A typical outsourcing company runs at about 50 to 100% margin.
All right.
When I say margin, I'm talking about the cost of a developer and the billable cost to a client.
Yeah.
So it's larger companies, it's higher, but because higher overhead for other reasons. But it's a 50 to 100%, markup.
Yeah.
We're running at about 20.
Right. Yeah. So there's obviously, because you don't have all those overheads, all those, needing a bench, the indirect costs, you don't need to create as much gross margin in every dollar you sell
No,
because
no.
the customer doesn't have as much cost, you don't have as much cost, and you're making it a flatter service delivery.
And I can reward an employee by paying them higher salary.
Right.
And everybody's happy, right? Everybody's happy. Customer still pays less. They make more, and I'm happy.
Right.
That's it. It's a win-win, right? That's the whole idea, right? We're partners. We're going to be successful only if the client is successful and an employee is successful too, right? Everybody's got to be successful and happy. That's the only time we're successful. Otherwise, we're out of business.
Now, you and I are in North America.
Yep.
And I'm in Canada, you're in the United States. Most of your clients are in the United States.
Yes.
Your chapter in your book that speaks to your really deep insight into regional differences and cultures of talent pools and aligning that with the needs of the client, I thought was just so insightful. Let's dive in and talk about that, because I think you've identified really unique cultural differences with different regions in the world about where the talent is and how that can be used as a positive or a negative for the client if those things either aren't understood or they don't align. So can you kind of give us a deep dive into each region, what makes those regions unique, and how that aligns with what a customer might want, depending on where the talent comes from?
So it's always a hot topic, right? It's a hot subject because when we talk about cultural differences, we have to remember not every person in every location is the same,
Sure.
but there are a lot of things that are common. And it's because of a lot of things. It's because of the social support system. It's because of the education. It's because of how much people have to survive and to get where they are.
We're not talking about race. I
Correct.
mean, culture are the accepted norms and practices of a group of people, right? It's
Correct.
how they grow, and cultures, develop organically. And if they're separated from other cultures, then they become unique,
Yep.
right?
And each culture, each location has its pluses and minuses. Now, a lot of times people will come to me and go, which one is better? I don't know. What are you looking for?
Right.
What are you looking for? So we work in two regions. About 90% of our business is Latin America, anything Mexico down south, and about 10%, maybe 12% of our business is Europe, right? Eastern Europe mostly. We don't do Asia, right? We don't work with Asia. And there's certain reasons why. I'm trying to think the best way to describe it. If you are looking, so let's say you're an outsourcing company, or I'm sorry, let's say you're a client and you're looking for an outsourcing company, and you're going to go and hire, and you're a large corporation, and you're going to go hire X number of people, and you're going to give them very well written requirements that they're going to go follow. I'll be the first one to say, go to Asia, right? Go to India, go to that region. You're gonna get an amazing result because people there are used to following directions. It's culturally, right? It's built into culture. They'll follow directions, they'll get it done. If
I
you're
want to, before you go on to another region,
Yep.
do you have anything else you want to say about Asia? Because I want to throw in a story.
I'll tell you a funny story about it, but go ahead.
Well, you tell me yours first, and then I'm going to share some insight that just happened in the last 2 weeks with me relative to that region.
So my funny story, and this is sort of comparing right Asia with Eastern Europe, not even talking like Latin America. Eastern Europe, they're not going to follow directions.
They're
Right?
not going to follow direction.
They're not going to follow directions.
Okay.
Give them directions, they'll throw them away. They won't open it.
Yeah.
They'll go and do something that they think they have to do. Now, which one is better? I don't know. You tell
Depends
me
on the
what's better
project,
for you.
right?
Huh?
Yeah. Depends on the project and how much independence and how much
Exactly. Depends on
troubleshooting.
what you're trying to do. So my funny story is when I was a Ticketmaster, I built this business case of moving our outsourcing, right, our operation from we have India and China, moving that to Ukraine. And I spent probably 2 months writing this business document, right, business case. And so finally, I'm going to meeting with our CTO to present it. 30-minute meeting. As always, right? It's 15 minutes late. And as we walk in, he goes, I don't have time to read this. I didn't read it. I obviously sent it to him. Right? I didn't read it. Oh, and by the way, I have to leave in 5 minutes or 10 minutes because I have another meeting to run to. So just give me the summary in 10 minutes. And I'm thinking like, oh my God, yeah, we got a document this big and I've got 10 minutes to present it. And we're sitting in the office. And I think, I'm sure I've told you that story. We're sitting in the office and he's got a window, right? So we're sitting in the office and there's a window on the right side of his office, right? On the right wall. And I said, here's the difference. Here's why I want to move in. I said, if I'm going to send instructions tonight to our team that exists today in India, and I'm going to say, by the morning, I need you to wash a window on the left wall of the office. I made a mistake, right? Instead of right, I said left. When I'm going to come to the office in the morning, I'm going to get a response that says, there is no window on the left wall of the office.
Right.
Okay. And he's
And
like,
they won't, and they probably won't clean the right window because that's not what they were asked to do.
exactly.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
everybody's sitting in the office, everybody's
That's
laughing.
an extreme example, but
It is an extreme example,
it's
right?
precise.
And he is like, okay, got it. Okay, you've done your kids. I'm like, no, wait, I'm not done. If I have the team in Ukraine and I do the same thing, right, and I send them left, when I'm gonna show up in the office in the morning, there will be a brand new window installed on the left wall. It'll be very clean. And now they're all cracking up. They're like laughing out of the table. And I said, the problem is, I know how to deal with the second problem. I don't know how to deal with the first problem.
Right.
So
So picking regions has a lot to do with the style of your
absolutely,
domestic team and your managers.
absolutely.
So,
So
so I'm going to share two
yeah,
stories, and all of this happened before I read your chapters on regional differences. And as I was reading it yesterday, I was laughing to myself again. I should have read Jane's book 2 weeks ago. So we have a team of people in the Philippines who are part of our marketing team. They work for us. They're outstaffed. We had a company who, because who found these people for us, and we pay that company, but these people are full-time our people. They report to our marketing manager as part of the team. Wonderful team of people, and it's been going really well. So my marketing manager was going on vacation for 2 weeks to Costa Rica. He's somewhere in the jungles down there right now. He's coming back this weekend. And we were meeting, for the 3 or 4 days prior to him taking off for a couple of weeks. And I said, well, what's your team going to be doing while you're away? And he was a little bit, I would say, overwhelmed and frustrated. He said, because he says, they're great. They do exactly what I ask. And I said, well, what's the problem? He said, they do exactly what I ask. He said, anything that I write down and give them a particular thing to do, it gets done.
yep.
But I have to write down everything. I can't give a concept yet. I haven't created that relationship and working structure because culturally they just want a list of what's got to get done. And for me right now, as I'm still getting this team rolling, it's a little bit overwhelming because I got to break every job down into a series of 20 things that must get done by when. And, but fortunately, he's very creative. And because your book was talking about how to deal with some of these things, and he's built a really robust online, agile, asynchronous project management tool that allows us to feed in, all sorts of things that need to change, and they can start picking away at this active list and things get done.
Mhm.
So again, I read your chapter on regional differences yesterday afternoon. Yesterday morning, I was a speaker at a webinar, and my marketing team had put together the slide deck for the webinar, including a QR code that at the end of my section of the presentation, there was a QR code that basically said, to make it easy for you to get in touch, if you want to ask Don deeper questions, scan the QR code and you'll be able to ask Don questions. Well, on Monday, just this past Monday, I discovered that, the QR code's there, but it didn't go anywhere. I went to a section on our website that said, coming soon. And I remembered what I was told 2 weeks ago about be very specific. And so I wrote to the whole team because I wasn't in the Philippines. I wasn't sure which of the team members handled our forms, which of our team members was handling website changes. So I emailed all three of them and I said, here's what I need done. I need this website. Here's the URL. I need this form placed on it and I need it done now. And I said, please, one of you reply back letting me know who's going to take what so I know that you have the ball on this. And then please let me know exactly when it's done. And because I was very precise, what I was amazed by was how effective and efficient they were. Within 5 minutes,
Yep.
it was done.
Yep.
But I realized because I had this conversation with Zach before he left that he knew he needed to be precise. I was precise, and then I do the webinar yesterday, and then I sit down to prepare for our chat. And I read this section, and I literally was sitting here at my desk laughing out loud, going,
And now imagine if you gave them an instruction, said, hey, this QR code doesn't work, can you fix it? It just
Yeah, and I now have a deeper insight into exactly what to expect.
Right.
Totally by fluke, because I had heard this comment from Zach
From
saying,
him, right.
we're at the point with the team where we're systemizing things, but I still got to be very precise. I made sure I provided the URLs and the name of the form I wanted to add it, and because I was precise, it was super effective and efficient. But had I said fix the QR code, I don't know what would have happened. But I didn't have that insight. I didn't have the thought process of that it might be something different. I would have, for me, it would have been fix the QR code. I would have felt like that meant make it work. But make it work how, right?
And
And
that's
so,
it's so important, right? So when you're building a product, you got to come up with requirements, right? What is this product for? When you're building a team, you got to come up with requirements. How are you going to use this team? What is this team going to be doing?
right,
And that will define, in part, what region you want to work with,
right.
right?
So, I've got an understanding, a deeper understanding and appreciation for my team because of what I experienced. And when you wrote it down, sometimes you experience something and then you try something and then you read about it and you connect the dots and go, all of a sudden the
It
wisdom
makes
lights come
sense,
on,
right?
right? And so, I'm sure there are even sub-regional differences within Asia around what that means. But as a region, this precision, preciseness, very regimented task focus.
Yep.
And then you mentioned Eastern Europe, not so much that way. They kind of throw the precision out the window and is it more conceptual or like how? Because you mentioned, I can envision someone being adaptive, but I can't envision someone deciding to, you say left window, and you meant right window, so they don't just clean the left window, they install a left window. So
Yeah,
that's how does that play out in terms of the day to day of what you can expect with people in that region?
they solve problems, right?
They
So
solve problems.
they solve problems. And that they may not solve it the same way you wanted to, and
Hmm.
they may make mistakes, right? So it's possible they'll do it wrong. And what I mean by wrong is I needed to do it this way because there was something I had in mind that I'm going to use it down the road for, and that how you did it's not going to work for me.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, you're going to get up in the morning or whatever the next time you talk to them, and it's going to get done, right? They solve problems, and that's part of it. Is going back to culture,
sure.
almost at a DNA level. To
Right.
survive in the Soviet Union, you have to solve problems.
Yeah.
To
My
survive,
my in-house sort of outsourced outstaffer guy, Jeff, that I told you about earlier, who does a lot of my app development, his entire team are Polish and Ukrainian.
yeah,
And some of them are in Poland, some of them are in Ukraine, and some of them are in Canada, but they are from Poland and Ukraine.
Ukraine, right?
And they are problem solvers. Like I am really good with that team. I can kind of give Jeff a vision of what I want done and what the outcome should look like, and they do it, and they're fine with they give me about 80 or 90% of what I had in my head just because of that structure. I don't need to give them the details of how to do it. They know how to do it. And then I can come in after the fact with Jeff and do a review of where they're at, and then I can give him some quick feedback saying, hey, tweak this, tweak this, tweak this. And I find that structure relative to app development from my style, conceptual, solve a problem, here's what the end result should look like. I'll provide some of the details, but not all. That combination works really well with that type of a team.
So my recommendation is always when I talk to clients, right? One thing I always ask them, they come in. So we started in Ukraine, right? So business started in Ukraine, expanded to what I call Eastern Europe. Geographically, it's not Eastern Europe because we're in Azerbaijan, we're in Georgia, we're in Turkey, right? So it's not Eastern Europe, but we call that region Eastern Europe.
Sure.
Because of the war in Ukraine, a lot of people actually moved out of Ukraine and they're now in Portugal and Spain and Poland. So the geography even expanded more. We still call it Eastern Europe.
Sure.
And then about 5 years ago, we've expanded to Latin America. And today, like I said, about 89% of our business is Latin America because the big difference, the big advantage of Latin America is time difference. Right?
Sure. They're in North American time zones.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when I talk to people and they go, hey, I'm looking to build this team, I need to build this, to hire these people. And I always ask, do you have a preference, Latin America, Eastern Europe, or it doesn't matter, right? Because we can do either or both, right? So it doesn't matter to us. And sometimes they have an idea and they have a very set mind of what they want, and sometimes they go, it doesn't matter, what's the difference? And this is my answer to anybody that asks that question. I said, listen, if you have a team of 5, 10, whatever people, and you're looking to hire, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more people to be embedded with your existing team, work with them, and be an expansion of your team, go to Latin America. They're really good, they're smart, they're hardworking, right? So all good. And the communication between team members is critical. So the time difference really, really helps you.
Right.
But if they tell me, I've got 1 or 2 people, but I actually need to hire a brand new team that's going to be responsible for this. They're going to be building this. Someone in isolation is right. They're building this, communicating with us, getting directions, but they're building it. I always go to Eastern Europe, because what we're going to do, we're going to find a local tech lead, somebody who's more senior, and then we're going to build a team under them, and you manage it all together. The communication is not as critical because it's a communication between, like, let's say, CTO or a chief product officer or whoever it is, and the lead.
Right.
And that can happen. There's plenty of overlap time, right, where that can happen, but they can work within their own time zone, and they're going to solve problems
Right.
in a more efficient way.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I can never answer the question what's better.
So
You've
you've sort of got an Asian way of doing things, which is very focused on detailed scope of work and
Yes.
taskmasters. You've got a Eastern Europe approach, which is solve a problem, be
Yes.
more creative and adaptable without all the details. And then you've got a Latin American sort of approach that is, if you need time zone time and a lot more interaction with your existing team, that can be a strength. And so in each region, they have their own strength and their own ways of doing things
Absolutely.
that you can make decisions based on those nuances.
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
most definitely. And there's a lot of it, right? Unfortunately, what's going on in the world now also defines what regions you want to go to.
For sure.
Ukraine used to be a very hot destination. It was very good. Today, we have people in Ukraine. We still hire in Ukraine, but there are certain difficulties because of the war, right? And
Absolutely.
people are naturally affected by it, of course.
Yeah, I mean, one of the developers that Jeff was using was in Kharkiv. And when the war started, he was blacked out for several weeks because he was in a bunker for several weeks while that city was just getting
Especially in
bombarded.
the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so it depends on where the fronts are in those things, but it's kind of, I mean, similarly, I've used a few different software companies to do certain things in Israel. That's all going to be really, certainly, there's a lot of uncertainty around all of that over the coming weeks with what's happening there, right?
Absolutely.
Oh.
And you have to sort of know this and understand that. There's another interesting aspect which we don't necessarily pay attention to: currency rates.
Currency rates?
Yeah,
Sure.
exchange rates. So we had a lot of people in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Mexican peso over the last year or so have gained about 20 to 25% against US dollar.
Right.
Because we pay everybody in US dollar, it effectively lowered the salary of people there by
Right.
10%.
Right.
And our job is to know all of this
Right.
and to sort of deal with that, right? That's part of what our service is, right? If somebody comes to us and goes, hey, you know what, I'm thinking, I've had this, right? I have one person on my team from country X, and I think I want to hire everybody in this country just because it makes sense. And sometimes I go, sure, but you got to realize the fact that you have one person from this country, it's just an odd accident, right? You can't scale your team needing to hire 10 more people in the next 2 months in that country just because it's not going to be available.
Right.
So things like you gotta keep all of that in mind.
On the topic of currency and remuneration and benefits, let's dive in there a little bit, because I think there is an opportunity for people to misunderstand how they can use that effectively to build a team. And I think there's also a missed opportunity. I read your section on team integration, And there were several things I was thinking about that we are going to be doing with our remote teams, particularly our team in the Philippines, that I think can have an order of magnitude of impact on their lives
Yep.
that would be inconsequential to my teams here in Canada. So let's talk about, if you're not outsourcing, you mean when you're outstaffing, you want these people to be part of your team, to be part of your purpose, to be part of creating results in your business,
Yes.
and you're leveraging local talent. Tell me about vacation and holidays and strategies around inclusion and decision making, all those sorts of things that people can do different or better to really integrate your remote teams in a more effective way. Because, and I, obviously you're looking at all of this in part of your strategies to consult your clients to help build these teams. But I just thought that your thinking on this whole topic was so insightful for everyone who is looking at or dealing with remote teams, in whether they're direct hire, not direct hire, or in whatever way it is.
So I'll actually start with something that has nothing to do with money, right? It has nothing to do with compensation. It has to do with, so we get a lot of times we get asked by our clients after they've hired people through us, one, maybe multiple. They go, I have a question for you. How do you manage? So we work with these outsourcing companies, and we often compete, right? We compete with others. And when I mean compete, our relationship is not exclusive, right? So they can be giving a position to us, and they can be giving the same position to other companies. Whoever delivers the person best, first and best, is who they're going to hire, and that's fine with us. How do you do this? What's the secret? And I always want to tell them, we're so good. It's because, no, that's not it. We do one thing that's different, and it's very important, especially when you're dealing with Eastern Europe and Latin America, and something we've touched on before. So if you are working with an outsourcing company and you're an employee of an outsourcing company, no matter what project you go on, it's a widget, right? You're going to be there for a little time, then they're going to move you to a different project, etc. What I always tell people, treat these people the same way you treat your local team members. The same, do not differentiate, doesn't matter. Don't ever say in a meeting, oh, that's our outsourced team or outstaff team or remote team. No. Yeah, we'll talk about this with them. And if it's a meeting that requires their participation, make sure you schedule it at a time that is convenient for everybody, right? Be reasonable. All of a sudden, guys, especially more senior guys, they appreciate that more than anything else. They feel, and this is something we've talked about in the beginning of this, they feel they're part of it. They understand the mission. They feel valued. And it's not represented in any numbers. It's represented in attitude and communication between the two, right? Oh, they actually want my opinion? I'll give them 10 times more work because they want my opinion, right? So that's number one necessity when you're switching to this remote model, when you want to build a team as opposed to hire a temporary worker. You got to do this. You got to address it. Now, we can move on to the money, right? So how do you come?
Well, before money, I'd like to just talk about, like, in your book you talked about some nuanced things that people might just discount as being unimportant. We'll talk about money in a moment, but I'm talking about freedom to go to a doctor's appointment, freedom, vacation, the cultural nuances of holidays and particular events in different countries. Like, just tell me a little bit about that, because I just thought that your experience in that is something people need to hear.
Okay, so see, even to me, this is obvious when we're talking, right?
Well, I know it's obvious, and to me, it's obvious because we have a core value of family first, so I really think about people over the system. But this is so simple, so costs you nothing, and can have such a huge impact on attracting and retaining top talent.
So let's use a basic example. When we used to be in the office, and in the US, a lot of companies, now it's changing a bit, especially in the high-tech world, but a lot of companies have 2 weeks vacation, right? That's your typical 2 weeks vacation. When an employee comes to me and says, I'm going to take off half an hour early today or 2 hours early because it's my wife's birthday or it's my kid's birthday,
Mm-hmm.
would I ever think, like if I'm a normal human being, would I ever think of, sure, yeah, please go fill out a paperwork requesting 2 hours off from your vacation pool, and yeah, you can do it. No, we don't do that. We go, have a great day,
Yeah.
have fun. And same, so there's flexibility, right? We're all human beings. Now, that comes with a flip side. If tomorrow somebody's going to work a few extra hours because there's a release, there's something's going on, we expect them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's that give and take. Apply the same when you're dealing with people overseas.
Mm-hmm.
If they want to take 2 hours off and go to their kids' play in a school or go to a doctor or go something, don't go, I'm going to deduct 2 hours of work for this week.
Mm-hmm.
Just let them go. Let them be
No,
normal
it's,
people.
I think equally, like, I think anyone listening can relate to this. If you're hiring a senior person who's got 10, 15, 20 years experience and you're in negotiation to hire them and you offer the standard package of 2 weeks vacation, they're going to say, we got to talk about that.
Yeah,
Because they have, over the course of their career, built up that they get 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks vacation. And to me, every time that conversation happens, I appreciate that people say it, and it's an easy thing to say. Of course,
yeah.
listen, you're a 15, 20-year person, and you want 4, 5, 6 weeks, whatever it is. There's two things to recognize. One, that's just normal, and two, it doesn't cost you anything. It's costing you some time, but it's not costing you more money. I mean, if you give someone $100,000 a year or $20,000 a year or $200,000 a year and you give them 4 weeks off instead of 2 weeks, you're still paying them. You're not paying them extra. You're just giving them some
right. That's
you're just
exactly
giving them
right.
some time. And I think you got to do the same thing with applying that anywhere else.
But it's not just that. That's there, but just because somebody is at work doesn't mean they're productive,
100%.
right? So I interviewed with this company many years ago for a role of a VP of engineering. Their VP of engineering was leaving, and so they wanted to replace him. And they came in and they interviewed, and they were about to make me an offer. And I met with the CEO and the owner of the company, and I had this odd feeling about him. Like I liked everybody else, but the guy was just odd. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
when they make me an offer, the CTO, the existing VP of engineering, calls me and says, let's go for lunch, right? Before you make a decision, let's go for lunch. I'm like, that's weird. Sure. And he told me certain things that are going on in the company. One of the things, now everybody is, there's no time cards, right? Because they're all engineers, they're all salaried.
Yep.
What CEO did, he would pull weekly records from the parking lot of when everybody pulled in and pulled out of the parking lot. And that's how he measured everybody's success.
Wow.
Guess what people did? They came on time and they left on time and they read a book.
Right. Yeah.
They're in the office.
Sure.
So you can't, basically, people will give you exactly what you measure them on. That's the nature. So if you're going to measure a developer on how many lines of code they write, they're going to write a lot of lines of code. They're going to be crap, but they're going to write a lot of lines of code. If
Sure.
you're going to measure somebody by how many hours they spend in office, they're going to spend 8 hours in office. Their productivity is not going to be any better, but they will.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, depending on the experience of the frontline managers, I get a lot of, oh, I got to get that person's got to be here at 5 minutes to 8. Well, that role's a creative role that doesn't need to interact with other people. I don't care where they work. I mean, one of the unique things that I think is different from an entrepreneurial mindset versus a time and effort mindset is, what do we care about? We care about people who create results.
mm-hmm.
If someone on my team can create the desired outcome of their role, win a sale, get a new campaign running, get invoices out the door, whatever it is. Everyone has unique functions and different roles in the business. If they can do that in 30 hours and they need to take a day off, or they take it in 50 hours, I don't really care. You focus on getting things done that are measurably but John Dewar wrote a book, on OKRs, and the book is called Measure What Matters.
Exactly.
Measure what matters, and stuff will get done.
I can tell you myself, I'm an old type of person. Right? So I believe
Yeah, I
it.
mean, you came up through software development in the
Right.
U.S. I mean, you must know OKRs.
But I work at best at night. So if
Sure.
I have something important where I need to focus and it needs to be quiet,
Hmm.
I'll get up in the morning, I'll do all my normal work, I'll spend time with the family, and
Hmm.
then at 11:30 midnight, when everybody goes to sleep, I'll walk into my office, close the door, and I'll work for 2 or 3 hours.
Sure.
And I'll do in those 2 or 3 hours more than I would do in the whole day if I started at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
But okay, right. So I work for myself. But I did the same thing when I was an employee.
Yeah, I have as well. Similar story. My mornings are not creative and not productive,
Yep.
right? I can have a few meetings, if I don't have to prepare and be creative and I just got to kind of be there to listen, that's kind of what I can do. And if customers, internal, external, supplier, whoever it is, they want to have meetings where they want to simply do some initial conversations, I can do that in the morning. If it's got to be productive, sort of workshopy kind of work, I got to do that in the afternoon. If it's creative work where I've got to sit there and be creative, 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock at night is my creative
Right.
time. If I've got to dive in to do sort of grind out kind of work, like this past week, I was doing a whole lot of contract pricing reviews and submitting all those sorts of things. And my best time for doing that Excel kind of grind is like 6 to 9 at night, right? There's no possibility of me doing creative work in the business in the morning or doing deep dive sort of intricate work in the morning. It's got to be more casual, conversation based interactions.
And,
So
and we know this about ourselves, but we forget that about people.
well, no, I mean, I think it's an important thing to think about, that you need to what is the kind of work I need that person to do, and when is the best time of day for them to be the most productive with those kinds of activities. And so understanding someone's accountability chart and what the kinds of results you want for people, I think, is really important.
So one of the things you mentioned vacations, right?
Yeah.
Our standard thing when what we offer to all the employees we hire, and that when I say standard, because we can modify the contract based on the client, we can adapt it.
Right.
But we go with the client and say, hey, here's the standard. Is a 20-day vacation, right? 20 PTO, not vacation, it's a PTO, right? So you want to be sick, you're sick, whatever, it's a paid time off. 20 days per year. And I've had clients go, oh, but that's more than my guys in the US get.
Mm-hmm.
So where's the problem?
Yeah.
The problem is not that they're getting too much, is the problem is that your guys are not getting enough.
Right.
And
The problem is comparison.
And that's where you get into culture.
Right.
Latin America is a very socially heavy infrastructure setup system, right? There's a lot of benefits that must be paid to employees. They're used to it.
Right.
Just because they're gonna work for the US company doesn't mean they're gonna be happy about having 2 weeks vacation per year or not having 2-year maternity leave.
Mm-hmm.
So how are we gonna accommodate that? Right? We have to. It has to be different.
Sure. I think that's the point, is it has to be different, not from where you are, but from where you are hiring that team member.
Absolutely.
So I'll tell you an interesting twist on that. So I was listening to a friend's podcast, and they were speaking specifically about the value and how much success they have had hiring teams in the Philippines, specifically the Philippines. And it just happened that I ended up finding a team in the Philippines that I was about to hire around the same time that I heard this. And on that podcast, I heard them say, what's amazing about the team in the Philippines is they are wired to be able to adapt to, their target audience is working for North American companies. And so they're completely culturally okay with time zone shifting to work in your time zone, meaning they're going to work night shift to be on our day shift.
Yeah.
And so inside of our businesses, our number one core value is family first. And so even as I started having conversations and interviewing people, they started telling me, like, you tell me the hours of work you want me to work and the meetings you want me to be at, and I'll align my schedule with yours. And I went, hang on a minute. I said, do you have a family? Yeah, I just got the first gentleman we hired. His name is Glenn. Glenn's fantastic. Glenn just recently, over the last 18 months, shifted from being a merchant marine on Filipino shipping cargo ships to starting a family, and he got involved in marketing and being on marketing teams. And he did it because he wanted to be home with his newborn son.
Right.
And he's going to take a job with me where he's going to work night shift. Everybody.
Right.
And I'm like, I went, hang on, Glenn. I said, our core value is family first. Our number one thing is right here. I said, what works for you? And he looked at me like I had 10 heads. He was in shock.
Yep.
I said, Glenn, I said, I want you to have a life. I want you to be successful here. You are part of our team now. You are part of our culture, the company culture, not the regional culture.
Mm-hmm.
And family first matters to us. We're okay with you having a life with your family to be able to, spend time with your wife and your kid when they're, I don't want you working every night. He looked at me like it was like I had just given him the biggest benefit in the world, that they didn't want to work night shift. They just knew they had to.
They had to, right? They didn't have,
and
the opportunity was, if I want to get paid decent amount of money, I gotta work night shift.
I gotta work for a North American company
Right.
on their shift.
Yeah.
And so the second thing we did is, okay, how are we going to manage that? Well, our marketing team has a 5:30 p.m., 7:30 a.m. meeting with them on camera. So the last thing we do here is have a huddle, a marketing team huddle on camera with the whole team. They're starting tomorrow and we're ending today, and we do a face-to-face turnover. And so we make those connections, and they can work day shift. And it's been working really, really great. The interesting thing that happened is, as we were adding to that team, the second, third, and fourth person, we had no problem finding people.
Right, of course.
Because they were like, these guys are different. They'll actually let us have a life.
So I'll tell you, when I was still a Ticketmaster, right, when I built my own team, right, so I was on the other side of the table, right, I built my team, and back then everybody was fighting for talent. A lot of outsourcing companies locally fighting for talent. We became what I called, employer of choice. Everybody wanted to work for us. We didn't do anything for recruiting. We had a pile of resumes sitting there waiting for an open position. Why? We applied a couple of things that we do in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Flexible hours. We don't scream at people. Another cultural difference, right? You got to understand this. We don't, if somebody makes a mistake, we don't start yelling and screaming at them. We're not like, oh, you made a mistake. We paid them fair amount of money, right? We didn't overpay, but we didn't fight over $100 per month, because we looked at it from the US budget, right? It's like, okay, well, $100 a month, who cares? And then I remember when we were hiring the first team, we actually ran into that, exactly what you're saying. Hey, we need the overlap, 10 hours time difference, right? So we need an overlap, 7 o'clock there is, 9 o'clock here. No, not, sorry, not 11 o'clock here, right? 11. How do we do this? How do we shift this? So we started asking them, can you work till 9? There was some pushback until I asked exactly the question you asked. What would work for you, with understanding that we have a 10 hours time difference? And they said that would work for me is that I work till 5 during the day. Then I leave from about 5 to 9. I get to spend time with my family, have dinner. And then at 9, when kids go to bed, I can work for 3-4 hours because I don't go to sleep anyway. So I don't mind sitting there with a laptop doing work and being in meetings. And I'm like, wait, that's better than what I wanted.
Yeah.
And you're telling me it's better for you? And they're like, yeah. So that little question and that little openness to change made us, in a matter of several months, where we didn't have to recruit. People were lining up to work for us.
Yeah. Now, Zhenya, we're almost out of time. I want to talk about one more thing that I thought was so obvious, so overlooked, and it is, we are North American companies, and we're used to, I think, as most organizations, if our companies are doing well, everyone gets some cost of living adjustment every year, whatever that annual raise is, right?
Yep.
And so if someone's making $100,000 a year, maybe they'll get 2 or 3 or 4 or 5%, and depending on if they're average or above average, that's pretty typical, right? Without positional changes and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 a year kind of change,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone expects it. No one really thinks it's wow, right?
Right.
Speak to how that's different for some of these other talent pools in other regions, because I thought your insight on this was just obvious but overlooked, and such a profound thing to impact lives.
So it's an excellent topic, and it's a one that, again, the cultural difference and cultural understanding, not even difference, but understanding of the other side, right? So in the US, let's talk I'm in California, right? Very expensive state. I'm in Los Angeles, one of the most expensive cities in the United States to live in, and granted, salaries go with it. So take a typical salary here for software, right? We're talking about software development. I don't know. I'll give a number between $150,000 to $200,000, right?
Sure.
Just a random number. Some obviously a lot more than that. Some are less than that. But say, let's pick 150. A raise that we expect here in the US is somewhere between 2 and 3%. 4 or 5% is like, wow, right? You literally walk in water. So, 2 to 3%. So talk about 150,000, 3%. What is that? $4,500 per year divided by 12 months, take 40% taxes. It's a sandwich. Right? So,
yeah, you get to have one extra fancy drink at Starbucks.
Pretty much. And so nobody looks at it as a wow. Now, let's look at some of the guys in Latin America, Eastern Europe, doesn't matter, right? The salary could be $4,000 or $5,000 per month. And in some cases, that's a lot of money. In some cases, they also pay taxes. Their taxes are actually even higher than ours. So, right, so they pay taxes, they pay, everything's covered. And then all of a sudden you come back to them and you say, I'm going to give you, making, say, $5,000. I'm going to give you 10% raise. That's $500 per year or $6,000.
Mm-hmm.
Very comparable to the same 2-3% that you just gave somebody locally, right? So in terms of amount of money. But for the US person, you bought them a Starbucks.
Yeah.
For somebody overseas, you possibly just changed their lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Because they went from living paycheck to paycheck to all of a sudden having $500 per month
of disposable income
to spend on the family, on kids, on travel, on whatever it is. It's a life-changing money. Could be. I can tell you, if you're talking about like very junior people, and I have this with some clients, not a lot. Most of our clients understand this, and I had this when I was, on the other side of the table, and I have some clients. What do you mean you want 10%? And you're talking about like, listen, this is a very junior person making $2,000 a month. 10% is $200. Are we really going to spend more than 5 seconds talking about it? Because we're going to spend more money talking about it than paying them $200.
Yeah. I always find it interesting when we spend a pile of time talking about a 50-cent issue in anything in the business, right?
Because the problem comes with a lot of times, unfortunately, here in the US, we're driven by HR.
Right.
And HR doesn't know anything about people. They know numbers. And they've been told, I got to get an average of 4%.
Numbers, policies, and compliance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where you got to understand that, right? A bonus.
I was having this conversation with my marketing manager about one of our people, and he said, hey, I want to bump them up a level. And I said, well, why are we talking about it? Like, they're in the Philippines. You want to talk about $300, $400, $500 a month? You should have already done it. right? Because it was life changing in terms of the impact that could have on that person, and it was inconsequential for us.
My wife and I we were in Thailand. This is 10 years ago. And we went to get one of those foot massages, right? They do foot massages everywhere. And we were tired. We walked the entire day. And so we're sitting in these chairs getting a foot massage and talking sort of among ourselves. Well, we got to tip them, right? Because they're doing a really good job. It's an hour and a half foot massage. And I'm like, how much are we going to tip? I don't know, right? But we'll see. So the massage is over, and we ask them, how much do we owe you? And she goes, $10. And I'm like, $10 each, right? And even that is ridiculously low. She's like, no, it's $10 for two. And I'm looking at her and my wife, and I'm like, I don't know how much to tip them.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tip them $1.
Well,
so
yeah.
Instead of 10, I gave them a 20. You realize I just doubled their pay for an hour and a half of work. And to me, it's a $10.
Yeah. And so the impact it can be just extraordinary. And imagine the power that can have on attracting great talent, retaining top talent, creating a sense of loyalty and productivity because they know, oh my God, I'm going to get recognized and rewarded in a way that I never expected.
Right.
Quite extraordinary, simple, obvious, but I think people needed to hear it because, when you're dealing with these regional differences, what we might think as insignificant can have a huge impact on those people, but that impact can draw that team closer and tighter in a way that I think is often overlooked.
Yeah. And, at the end of the day, it's our goal is to get the best people, right? Get the best people on the bus, right? We all know this. So it's get the best people and now motivate them to do the best possible job.
Right.
Don't apply it based on the knowledge that you have here in the US.
Right.
Give them what they need because it could be very different. Another classical example, we have a lot of clients that they want to give a bonus. And they always go to the immediate first option we do here in the US. It's either Amazon gift card or Starbucks gift card. Right. Not very useful in the most part of the world. Right? So you got to adapt. You got to adjust it. And so they come to us and go, hey, we want to give them a bonus, this much money. What would you do? And we're like, we'll take care of it. Don't worry about it.
Right. We'll find out what's applicable and where they are.
Right.
Zhenya, where do people get your book?
It's on Amazon. And more importantly, it's on our website on Mirigos.com. You can get there and you can actually get a free copy by just asking for it.
Oh, spelling that out, it's www.mirigos.com.
That's correct.
Okay. And how do they find you?
Coming to the website, my email is Zhenya, my first name is Zhenya @mirigos.com. And that's probably the best way to get in touch with me. Or we have a form to get in touch with us on the website. Okay. Either way works.
We'll make sure we put your website and your contact details on the show notes for this episode when the team gets this out into the world. Zhenya, love the book. Love you, my friend. Looking forward to seeing you soon in Los Angeles. I'm back there in December. And tell Rita that 2 days ago, Gemma got her PR card that we were talking about. So she's good.
I was going to ask you about that. Awesome.
So that's all sorted. So our next trip to Los Angeles will be together. I've got to renew Abby's passport, but that's an easy process. So, the plan right now, without working out the details, is we're all going to come and we'll hang out when we're there in early December. I'll get in touch with you in advance. But for our listeners, folks, Zhenya's my pal. I have a little bit of sense of pride in this book because I convinced him to write this book while we were on vacation together last Christmas. He did it, and now we're going to tell people about it. I've read it. I enjoyed it both from the point of view of his deep insight into building development teams, but I think you should read this book, and you could substitute out marketing team, sales team, finance team, remote worker with engineer, because the insight that Zhenya has in this book is universal across how to capture global talent to give you local results. Zhenya, my friend, thanks a bunch, and look
Thank
forward to
you.
seeing
And
you
I
soon.
want to say, not only the book, there's a lot of things that you influenced and encouraged me to do, and I'm doing that, and I'm forever thankful.
Hey, it's entrepreneurs help each other, simply put. Even more importantly, when you're friends.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Bye for now.
Bye.